What's up guys, this is Jan for Chess24. This is supposed to be a highlight video for the first day of Blitz in the Paris Grand Chess Tour. 9 action-packed rounds of Blitz games between the world's best players. But I've decided 2 of the world's best Blitz players, if not the 2 best world's Blitz players, were so outstanding that I'm gonna focus on the game between them. I am of course talking about Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen. After the rapid part of the event, Hikaru Nakamura led the field by 1 full point going into the 18 rounds of Blitz, and Nakamura managed to increase his lead with some very, very powerful play throughout the event. Even Magnus Carlsen could not really keep pace. Nakamura got lucky in one game, I think is fair to say, where he faced Vasilin Topalov, not known as a Blitz specialist, but he did outplay or did get a winning position against Nakamura in that game. Here it is black to move, and black can queen his pawn. And that's what Topalov did, or attempted to do, because he played e1, but did not promote this pawn into either a queen or a rook, but instead pressed the clock, probably assuming that Nakamura would take with the rook, since that's the only legal move. But that's not allowed. You gotta replace the pawn by a piece. You can't just put it on e1 and then press the clock. Nakamura claimed that that was an illegal move and was granted the win. Strange incident there, because I'm sure Topalov should be familiar with those rules. But it happened and Nakamura got the full point in that one. However, he didn't need any luck really in the other games, just put together a fantastic performance. And as if it had been scripted, he was to face Magnus Carlsen in the last round. Nakamura had increased his lead to 1.5 points then. This is not the last round of the event, there's 9 more games of Blitz to come, but the last round of the day. And let's jump into the game between these 2 chess superstars, world number 1 and number 2 in the Blitz world rankings. Am I overusing the word world? Unlikely. Nakamura goes for 1 d4. Carlsen plays a line we've seen him employ recently, the move knight bd7 in this position. This used to be considered to be, well, not mainline material really, because of bishop f4, which happened in the game when the critical move is d takes c4, e3. And here white was normally gaining a small plus after either knight b6, bishop takes c4, knight takes c4, queen a4 check, regaining the piece with a space advantage. Or another move that's sometimes tried, knight d5, when white can just take on c4. And the structure is also supposed to be a little better for white. However, there has been a move that maybe changed the evaluation. I'm still not sure about it, but the move b5 has become very trendy here. Looks very strange because you can just take it and the knight is attacking c7 while ruining black structure. However, black gains quite a bit of time with bishop b4 check. Knight d2 is a move here, but Nakamura decides to play knight c3, and I happen to know a little something about this position because I've had it in a tournament game against Arkady Naidic, and the players followed that game for quite a while. Knight d5. Here I played the move a3, which I was quite proud of, but no one seemed to follow me while this b5 kept gaining some traction. So I was happy to see that Nakamura also decided this was a good move. The tactical point is after knight takes c3, you go queen d2. Of course not bc3, bishop c3, but queen d2, and white wins the piece back. Black has to try to inflict some damage before that happens. That's what Carlsen does with knight e2, a takes b4, knight takes f4, e takes f4. When we have a very weird pawn structure, both sides have pretty terrible pawns if we look at it. And the question is, whose pawns are weaker and why? Bishop b7 is an obvious move. The pawn structure could become even funnier if white were to take on c4 here, was to take on c4 here, but he should not really do that because 7 isolated pawns are like 5 too many. Therefore, Nakamura played the move. I also play bishop e2, castles, castles, knight to b6, knight to e5, all very natural moves. White is trying to grab the c4 pawn, and if he manages to do so, he would have a reasonably healthy extra pawn, in spite of his funny looking pawns. Maybe too much red. The black remaining pawns would also be weak. Therefore, black has to do something about it. Queen d6 is a good starting point because white can't take because of queen to c6 with a double attack. And here Nakamura decides to improve my play, because I played rook fc1 in this game against Knightage, when after rook fd8, black is fine. And therefore, it is more important to cover the d4 pawn, which Nakamura does by going rook fd1. Now, knight takes c4 can be a threat in some lines because his bishop has the f1 square, even though things aren't that easy. Carlsen, following his preparation, blitzed out rook fb8 here. It turns out you still should not take, because after takes, bishop c4. Queen c6 is no longer good because of bishop f1, but there is a little trick. Bishop takes g2. And if king takes g2, queen c6, black wins the piece back with an advantage. Can't do it, but no need to do it either. White just plays rook ac1, increasing the pressure against c4. And here, I'm not quite sure what went wrong for Magnus Carlsen, but he played the move queen to d5, threatening checkmate. When it turns out that after the simple reply bishop f1, maybe he underestimated that there is no way he can defend his c4 pawn and is doomed to playing on a pawn down. Probably a better choice was the move bishop to d5, when it's not so easy for white to win a pawn. White might be slightly better after something like b5, but this is where the theoretical debates should focus in the future, in my opinion. Instead, queen to d5, bishop f1, h6 after a long thought for Blitz standards. This is a Blitz game, 5 minutes plus 2 seconds. Carlsen realized that he can't really keep his pawn and has to defend. That's what he does, but of course this is a very, very pleasant situation for white with his extra pawn. He can increase the pressure. The play develops quite logically, so I'm gonna go through a couple moves very quickly. It's important for white to push his pawn up to b5 to fix this weakness on a7. And Nakamura accomplishes that. Rook b7, followed by rook d8. Carlsen defends with his typical tenacity. Nothing easy here. Nakamura decides to go for the endgame, very understandable choice. Queen e5, and after queen takes e5, nothing better on the horizon really. D takes e5, this weakness on d4 disappears. But Carlsen, tricky as he is, at least tries to inflict white with a new weakness by going g5 instantly, f takes g, h takes g, and this pawn on e5 potentially could become a target. Still, the situation is stabilized, and white has an endgame with a healthy extra pawn. So the question seems to be only if Nakamura can convert this or not. Rook c7 also natural, exchanging one pair of rooks. And here is where things, I don't know, they're not getting out of hand yet, but become a little strange. Nakamura plays the move rook to a1, which is logical, targeting the a7 pawn, but he did not quite address black's plan, king g6, intending king to f5. And you could prepare for that by going f3, for example. After king g6, you can throw in a little check if the king goes somewhere, rook to c3. White will then bring his king to the center, and black would face a very unpleasant defense. Instead, rook a1 was played, king to g6, and here it turns out if you go bishop d3 check, which looks very logical to stop king to f5, this king can go to h6, and it's not so easy for white to coordinate, because bishop takes g2 is in the air. You can't really keep this bishop here without concessions. Therefore, Nakamura decided to prevent king f5 by more radical means. He went g4, stopping king f5, but slightly weakening his king's position and making it much harder to get his king to the center with f3, king f2, king e3, because now the pawn on f3 would be hanging. Therefore, Carlsen gained some counterplay, played the very tricky move rook to d2 here, when after rook takes a7, rook to d1, white would be very tied up. This is not the desired outcome. Therefore, after rook a3, questioning the bishop to d5, Carlsen managed to activate his rook. You still can't take rook a7. Still rook d1, intending bishop c4 with trouble. Rook a1, bishop f3, rook a3, repeating moves here, but of course Nakamura does not want to settle for a draw yet. He goes f3, trying to block this bishop, and Carlsen reacts by playing f5, trying to gain some breathing space for his king. This is a key moment where Nakamura decides to take on f6, which I believe is a mistake, at least practically speaking. The computer gives some strange move like rook a6, and it's hard to convert the extra pawn, but still it's only white playing for a win because this king is still boxed in and there's not that much that black can really do. Rook a7 was also possible. After e6, king f6, this king, however, all of a sudden has a pretty clear path towards the center and towards the white king, and things become a lot more mixed. Rook takes a7, Bishop takes f3. Now, black has to... White has to pay some attention to black's plan of activating this king, and it turns out this passed b-pawn is not really going anywhere fast because the bishop controls the b7 square, and the rook can also go to b2 to control it from behind. Rook a3, bishop to d5, rook c3, rook b2. And here Nakamura, I believe, commits a quite serious mistake. Of course, it's easy to be Captain Hindsight. This is a blitz game, and everybody, even the world's strongest blitz players, will make some mistakes. But after rook to c1, which was played in the game, the black king really manages to activate and come in. And that should have been prevented by playing rook to e3. When it's still unclear if white can do anything to convert his extra pawn, I quite doubted. Black has counterplayed 2 now, and white is very, very passive. So I guess the game would have ended in a draw. But after rook to c1, king to e5, it turns out that it is white already who is in trouble, because not only is his king very active, it also supports the passed e-pawn very well, while as mentioned, the white b-pawn is not really going anywhere. Therefore, here the defense is already incredibly unpleasant. Rook e1 check, king f4, rook to d1. Maybe it was a better chance to fight for the second rank with rook e2. But after rook to b1, let's say king to f2, e5, we can see the black pieces are so fantastically coordinated that it is still white who has to try to survive here. Not sure he would have accomplished that. Instead of rook d1, king to g3, and the black pieces are just overwhelmingly active. The plan is in one way or another to go bishop f3, e5, e4, e3, or rook h2, rook h1. And there is surprisingly little that white can do about it. So a big turnaround in this game if we remember the position we're coming from after rook takes d7, rook takes d7. Absolutely no problems for white, a healthy extra pawn. And Nakamura was probably already calculating. I don't think he was calculating, but he had reasons to expect to go into the final day 2.5 points ahead. But that didn't happen. Instead, he ended up in this situation. And let's switch, if I manage to do that, to video of the final moves of this game. This can only take hours because of my technical prowess here. I was going to say here we are, but we aren't here yet. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. Fun. Here we go. Sorry about that, but there is some hope now. Here we go. We're gonna see that Carlsen struggled a bit to find the correct plan, but you can also see on the clock that both these guys were operating pretty much on increment. 25 seconds for Carlsen there and 11 for Nakamura. And it's much easier to be the attacker in this position because you can try left and right, move around a little bit. Carlsen, there we see he's repeating moves, trying to find the best setup. And eventually he would get there. Bishop f3. Attacking the rook, Nakamura decides to give a check on d4. Well, that was a bit of a spoiler, but I'm pretty sure he does. There you go. Rook d4, king g3. And the black pieces are just so active that there is no way out. Rook d3, pinning this bishop, but now black brings in his last reserve, the e-pawn, which advances all the way to e4, b6. Desperate attempt, but black just takes it and activates his rook, which has 2 good squares on b2 or b1. There is very, very little to be done about it, and the e-pawn decides the race here after e3. There is no defense to the threat of e2, and therefore Nakamura had to resign, which, yeah, I'm sure ruined his day because he played a fantastic blitz event. To put things in perspective, let's have a look at the standings after this, where I believe Nakamura is a full 5 points ahead of the third place player, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, even after this loss. But Carlsen winning this game is only half a point ahead, which means there's a lot of drama still to come in the final 9 rounds, because now, of course, Carlsen feels he is within striking distance, and we're going to have a big race between the two players who've really been cruising through this event, which is amazing, because if you look at the other names, it is an absolute world-class field, and to put such distance between you and these other guys is, yeah, I don't know how they do it. Very, very impressive stuff. And Magnus Carlsen, Mr. Clutch, with a big victory in the last round. It's gonna be an exciting final day. Thank you guys for staying with me, and hopefully if you're watching this in time, you can join the live commentary by Super Grandmaster Peter Svidler and yours truly at 2 p.m. Central European Time on the 12th of June, which is tomorrow if you're still watching this tonight. Else, ignore everything I just said. Thanks for watching. See you guys soon. Bye bye.